Good morning. From my introduction and from the title on the board here, you can probably tell I'm not going to be talking about the science that I do. And in fact, I'm very grateful to Dr. Feller for her talk, which really sets this up nicely. So I'm going to be talking today about two things primarily. First is just, as someone who's just transitioned into a professional career as a scientist, what does the road look like? You know, albeit just a couple miles down it. You know, what were the off-ramps, what were the obstacles that came up, how I navigated them, and so on, with the hope that some of them maybe will resonate with you. The second thing I want to talk about is something I've really been obsessed with over the last couple of years, and that's trying to define my philosophy, my style, how I approach my science, and how I take in feedback, criticism, try to improve myself, and how those experiences in grad school and beyond have helped me do that, shape that philosophy. So, just to lay it out on the table, this is not this talk, right? I'm only 3 years maybe removed from some of your experiences. I'm no expert, but I am, thanks to Dr. Feller, a data point in this distribution. I'm calling back to all of you to show you a little bit about what might be ahead for you. And in fact, as you listen to my talk, you're going to be hearing a lot of things that sound a bit like this. It's a lot of stumbling around in the dark, metaphorically, trying to find my way, trying to identify where I'm not so great at things, where I'm good at things, the things that really are hampering my progress. It's awful. And in the process of talking about laying out this philosophy and what I found to be the most important values in doing my science, I hope I leave you with something that's useful. Hopefully not anything that makes you do this. Really, though, in essence, this is just a story about a career like yours that's a work in progress. So there'll be two themes that I'll be going over that permeate the talk and kind of run through my approach to science. And the first is something my mom told me when I was 5 years old. It is, honesty is the best policy. Now, I'm not talking about scientific integrity, which is, of course, of utmost importance to what we do. And we may be hearing about that later in the session. No, I'm really talking here about honesty with ourselves. And how do we get to that? Asking hard questions and really trying to come up with earnest answers for them. What am I good at? What do I suck at? You know, how do I communicate and how can I be more effective at it? How do I deal with failure, criticism? How do I set goals? How do I make plans and how do I try to execute to get to the end goal? Who do I know, and this was a tough one for me, who do I know that's maybe a little bit threatening, that's really good at X and I need to know X? And how am I going to go convince them to teach me about it? And lastly, this is something that's been preoccupying me more and more. How do I become a leader? What is this thing that I know I want to be that involves making impact in science? And what's the road and what are the milestones to get there? The second theme that I'll be talking about deals with my experiences and seeing how science is really full of balances that we have to strike and paradoxes. So we'll be talking about some of those, at least as I've seen them, over the course of the talk. So when I got into grad school at Duke, I had some early wins. I got some analyses done. I felt like I had some good momentum. And then, I don't know, about 6 months in, everything ground to a screeching halt. I couldn't stop hitting red lights. And it was frustrating me to no end. So I sat down with my co-advisor at the time, told him what was going on, and he could see the frustration in my face, knew exactly what to do, and started drawing this graph. Now, I have to say, anytime you see a graph with productivity on one of the axes, you start freaking out, and I am no different. But I went along with it. So he started drawing this curve. He says, I know where you're at right now. You know, you feel like everything's going well. You got some good momentum. And at this point in the conversation, I felt pretty good. And then he started drawing this. Got almost to 0 on the productivity scale, looks at me as he's finishing the curve and says, you're about here, right? I didn't know what to make of this. I was floored, and I really thought that grad school was just not for me. Sensing the panic, obviously, in my face, he told me to bear with him. He kept drawing this plateau, which didn't exactly make me feel better, but he explained that this was just inevitable. Right? The slogs will come. There'll be periods where you just have to keep chipping away and it feels like you're not going anywhere. But the best part of it, he said, was, and he was right, that the results would just come as long as I kept my head down, kept chipping away, kept making connections, kept looking outside myself to try to find solutions. Now, what he didn't tell me was that after I finished my PhD, I learned how much I didn't really know and how tired I was and how inevitable the crash would be. But that's a story for another time. What this experience taught me, if anything, was the value and also the double-edged nature of perseverance. So I had romantic notions of it when I came into grad school, that letting go of things or stepping back from something was counted as a failure. That I was a quitter, right? But I started to question whether perseverance was really all it was cracked up to be when grad school a lot of times felt like this. Or like this. And so, just as an example, I'm going to relay to you my brief but disastrous experience as a wet lab biologist. I had the worst sterile technique imaginable. I think everything I came close to, not even touched, got contaminated. My results took at least 3 times longer than anyone else's to generate. And I, frankly, just didn't have the temperament for it. So I tip my hat to any of the wet lab biologists in the room for your patience, and I would say your arcane faith to get things done in this area. But as I sat down with my co-advisor, again, to discuss what was going on and that maybe I should focus on the computational aspects of my project, he said very sternly to me, "Michael, I think that's best for everyone involved." And so the lesson, I think, from this part, at least on the technical aspects of the project, was you can't be afraid to let go, to step away. Always keeping in mind that it's a strategic risk, right? And I'm certainly not advocating quitting when things get hard, but just knowing that in the back of your mind, as you make earnest attempts to attack your problems from different directions, it's okay to keep in the back that there might be another way, and there might be time to just let the thing go. There's also an aspirational or personal aspect to this perseverance question that I realized as I kept marching forward, because I thought that what I was supposed to be was this hybrid scientist. I was supposed to collect the data and analyze it. I knew that was what I was supposed to do. But in the end, it became some kind of Einstellung, right? Installed thinking, this thing I never questioned that led me maybe down a path I shouldn't have gone down. So this brings me to the topic of ego. Because I admit it, when I came to grad school, I had a bit of one. I thought that success was just going to come and that failures were going to be few and far between. But in fact, I found as I kind of persisted in this belief of what I was supposed to be and how I was supposed to be right on a lot of things and just keep moving forward with nothing but success, I found it to be very crippling. Because in effect, it's a cocoon, right? It's a way of protecting yourself, not only from the failures and mistakes that teach you about things you're not very good at, things you need to improve on, but it also insulates you from the really amazing people, like at an institution like this one, who can help you and show you better ways of doing things or new perspectives on how you conduct yourself as a scientist. The flip side of this was, as I went to more and more conferences, you're expected to be confident, right? Not arrogant, but confident. You're expected to sell yourselves effectively so that you can attract funding and people, and you're expected to know your stuff. So striking this balance, I came up with this mantra that's really helped me, that I know I'm good at what I do, but I also know I still have a lot to learn. So I had a couple of what you'd call hands-off PIs during grad school, and by all accounts, nice guys, really nice people. Scientists I respected and admired. The feedback just wasn't what I wanted it to be, I guess. I guess you could say I was always waiting for that hug. That was just never coming, right? And in reflection, I realized that them not saying as much to me as what I needed spoke volumes. Because if there was something wrong, at least I told myself, they would have told me. But more than that, more generally, why did I need the external validation when I was expected as an independent scientist to go out and kind of follow directions on my own, to set plans, to set goals, and not be afraid when the plans fell apart, but just to be agile when they did. So I really took this experience, admitting that the advisor was a very vital part of the experience, to start to take my own initiative and to recognize that the project was on me, and that no amount of external validation was going to change the fact that I had to be my own scientist. So, a question I asked myself a lot during grad school and even afterwards was, and I hope maybe this is something you've asked yourselves too, is am I ready? Are we ever really ready enough, right? Am I ready for that application? Is the paper good enough, right? Is this grant the absolute best it can possibly be? And I found that I was caught in this kind of infinite loop of preparation, almost for preparation's sake, right? That there was no real accounting in the end for spackling over the gaps, preparing for every possible contingency, because in the end it was keeping me from just trying things. There were times when I just couldn't be ready enough, and what would have worked better is just diving into something, tinkering, playing with things, getting feedback about what worked and what didn't. And what's great about the field we're in is that its stock and trade is all about giving feedback, right? Grant reviews, paper reviews, at least the ones that aren't petty and useless. Speaking to PIs at poster sessions, right? This is what the field we're in, and in a lot of professions this may be hard to come by, but it won't come, and that resource can't be tapped unless we put ourselves out there. So as I was getting ready to leave my grad school experience, I had a couple of academic postdoc offers I was entertaining. I was also entertaining an offer from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, where I'm at now. I sat down, I had a coffee with my advisor, and I'll never forget his face. It was just sullen, like someone had died. Because I told him I was really considering going to the lab, not academia. And he said, Michael, just don't do it. Don't do it. I didn't know where he was coming from. I thought that for some reason, you know, this was just unappealing to him, maybe for personal reasons. As we talked more, we realized that he, and even to an extent I, thought that this was the only path forward. When in fact, as I talked to more people and as we explored the different options that were there, the picture looked a lot more like this. And I have to give props where props are due. Mohammed Noor, a professor at Duke, organized a fantastic class called Succeeding Beyond Grad School that essentially brought people from these different areas to meet us as grad students to talk about how they used science in their everyday careers. Not necessarily just the tenure track route, but lots of different routes. So this just opened up my eyes and really showed that there were more than just a narrow set of opportunities in front of me. And I can't overstate how important getting some information on alternative career paths was. So we have often heard it said that a PhD is a marathon, right? Not a sprint. And I couldn't agree more, but if you're like me, you hate marathons. They hurt. There's hills, right? And there's this notion nominally that there is a finish line somewhere. It's somewhere. You're running towards it. But you're not really thinking about that because your hamstrings are killing you. You're focused mostly on just keeping going, right? Keeping the pace. And I chalk this up a lot to the fact that the PhD is a learning experience. It's open-ended. You know, there is an end game, but that the results aren't necessarily as important as the process. But as I've transitioned into my career as a professional scientist, I've come face to face with a lot of hard realities about how results-oriented what we do is, and how important it is to set goals, make plans, and stick to deadlines. So we've all heard of the work-life balance, but a balance I've found that pops up more and more in my everyday life is the learning results balance, where learning is more open-ended, results are more time-sensitive, and where I have to build in time day to day to do both. If I do too much of the learning and not enough of the results, my collaborators get pissed off. You know, my team doesn't feel as motivated. We can't put papers out. We can't get grants, etc. If I focus too much on the results, my intellectual contributions start to stagnate because I'm not keeping up as much with the literature or the latest packages, ways to be more effective and more efficient. So I have to come clean and say that I am a diehard Cleveland fan, and I'm very proud of my Cavs for seizing their opportunity over a very overrated Golden State team. I couldn't help myself. But, you know, I knew I'd get that response, and so, you know, I wasn't so pleased with my Indians a few months later, who didn't quite do the same thing. We were all like this, but we persevere. And this advice up here actually was given to me by my supervisor at the lab as I was converting from postdoc to staff. And this is a very earnest and authentic guy. I respect the heck out of him, would lay down and die for him. So I knew when he said this, he wasn't just throwing some corny nicety my way. He meant it. And what I took him to mean was that just chipping away every day, making those connections, reading just a paper, making little bits of progress was building out that platform for the next opportunity when it presented itself. And as I exposed myself to more and more of these opportunities, I got to really like it and like having multiple irons in the fire. So I would submit that paper and I'd want like crazy to get the next one out just so I could keep a couple of things going. One maybe panned out, the other didn't, but in the end, I got a lot out of the entire experience. And what was great about this too was it was a self-perpetuating cycle. As one thing went out, even when I failed at it, another thing would come back and potentially be successful. And so I kept gaining experience and confidence even when things didn't pan out. And if that is of any use to you, I hope that you can carry it with you. So you're probably wondering why I have a picture of A&E's Pride and Prejudice cast up here. And it is not because my wife has made me watch this about 18 times. It's definitely not because I sit curled up on my couch with a glass of Merlot and watch it when she's away, which I do not do. The story is great because it's set against a backdrop of a Victorian England where social connections really matter. They can make the difference between your kids being taken care of when you pass away or not, or between finding the right spouse or not. But all kidding aside, you're at one of the greatest institutions in the country, if not the world. There are resources around you in the people here because not only of the great science they do and the technical skills they have, but the stories they have to share that can broaden your perspective not only on how you conduct your business as a scientist, but on how you live your life. And I mean that for me, this has been extremely helpful. I've also found that my background and skills have helped me reach out to my communities around me and meet new people via volunteer opportunities. So I'll take this time to plug the one I work with called Citizen Schools of California, where we do 10-week apprenticeships in East San Jose and Oakland with middle schoolers, teaching them STEM career skills and also general career skills. And lastly, Silicon Valley and just the general Bay Area are one of the most connected and tech-savvy places in the entire world. So take advantage of the time that you have here to connect at professional events. I just heard about UC Berkeley's Thriving in Science series. Learn more about the paths that are available to you and to try not to narrow your band of opportunities as you transition from grad school into your professional lives. So where are we now? Well, I hope I've left you with a couple nuggets of experience that will help you moving forward. Above all, two things. The first, I've also heard the PhD described as the time where we learn how to learn, and that definitely includes about ourselves. Moreover, I hope I've shown that it's important, at least as it has been for me, to be open to the possibility that the you, scientifically speaking, you think you're supposed to be, maybe isn't the you are supposed to be. And that by exposing yourself to new challenges and people, you can either crystallize that view or call it into question, right? We're scientists. This is kind of an assumption. And what do we do when we set up experiments? We're questioning those assumptions. Above all, whatever happens, science depends on you being you, right? What I mean by that is it doesn't just depend on your knowledge and your skills, it also depends on you articulating a style, cultivating a core set of values, coming up with a philosophy that's going to permeate your work as you put it out. It's going to filter down to your students that you mentor and teach. It's going to become a vital and important part of your career, at least it has for me. So I'm going to sign this off the way I do all my emails. Take care. Ask the hard questions of yourself. It's something I do every day and will continue to do. It's an ongoing struggle, but I think an important one. Keep your friends close as you go through these tough times. Grad school is definitely, as I showed in the first slides, a bit of a slog. Having these personal support networks around is really invaluable. Make time to restore yourself, be it through exercise, activities, volunteer work I found has been particularly rejuvenating for me. And I want to advocate strongly for seeking out professional development opportunities. I think grad schools are increasingly getting more and more wise to this. I actually just participated in a workshop at Cold Spring Harbor on leadership and bioscience that Carl Cohen has run, and it was amazing. We talked about negotiation, giving feedback, conducting productive meetings. It really was a worthwhile experience. And to these I would add any public speaking opportunity you can get, as well as improv, for those times when you're trying to come up with filler words like I'm doing right now. And lastly, yes, thank you very much for the privilege to speak with all of you. If you have any questions about what I do or what life is like at the lab, I'd be happy to answer. My email is there, or chat with you at the panel discussion later. Thank you so much.